box.
Hello and welcome to Con Air, the podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jake Lewitt, and on this show, myself and my regular co-host, Mark Hoffmeyer, fly away through Con Air scene by scene with some wonderful guests. But this is a special bonus episode, which is a re-release of an episode Mark did on his podcast, Movies, Films and Flicks. This is an episode on The Rock. This was released in May of 2021, where Mark and his guest, Niall, talk about the 1996 Michael Bay action classic, The Rock. Starring, of course, Nicolas Cage. It's when Nicolas Cage goes to a prison, similar to Connor, with Sean Connery, Ed Harris. It's loads of people, a bunch of people in this film. Wonderful film, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man that is about to go on a really messed up tour. Niall Moore, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, Mark.
I love that line. Obviously, I didn't say it for PG-13 reasons, but I love that scene. Like, what kind of messed up tour is this? I love that line so much. You know, in the commentary, Michael Bay said that he just would put the camera on the actors, the random like the extras that were there, or paid actors that were featured, and he would just have them say weird lines. And then that came out of that.
Yeah, just have them say random crap.
Yeah. And that's I don't know. It just seems like a very Michael Bay thing to say in a Michael Bay movie back in '96, because his movies now are littered with comments like that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched much of his stuff recently, but, I'd say The Rock is probably his best movie, to be honest. Like,
oh, yeah. I mean, what would it go up against? 13 Hours, Pain and Gain, the first Transformers?
Was Armageddon him?
Oh, yeah, Armageddon, Bad Boys 2, the Transformers movies, The Island.
Like, there are a few in there that are good, but I don't think any of them are classics like The Rock is. Like, this movie is so ridiculously quotable.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a group chat with some of my buddies the other day, and I was like, I'm watching The Rock because I'm going to be doing a podcast on it, and it just denigrated into like this like stream of quotes from the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just like, take great pleasure in gutting you, boy. And it's like,
peach sorbet persuasion. Which is the weirdest line ever. But, I got to tell you, I agree with you. I think this is Michael Bay's best movie. I own the VHS, I own the DVD, and then I lost it, now I have the Blu-ray. But this movie, it's kind of at that time where there's still a lot in camera. This isn't super, like, it's just an old school machine gun, capable people killing capable people film. And it just hits so well because you have really good villains, right? You have what, Ed Harris, who's the antagonist, but then he sort of gets pushed aside for Fry and Barrow, right? And then because they're the people that become the main villains. It's a really interesting, layered. Like, you never know that Michael Biehn's just going to get wiped out in the first hour of this movie.
You see him as like the Navy SEAL leader. Like, you expect he's going to be like the guy teaming up with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage to like save the day, right? Because he's a big name.
Yeah, big names, and then they just get wiped out. And then you get Nick Cage, who, he had done Kiss of Death, and he had a chase scene in Raising Arizona, but this was his introduction into the action world. And
it's just before Con Air or after?
Yeah, this is what kicked it off. He did this,
right,
and then he did
Con Air and Face Off.
Con Air and Face Off, because he shot them back to back, Con Air and Face Off, when he did that. Yeah. But I mean, he was hot off leaving Las Vegas, and he had done like Guarding Tess, movies like that, and then here he is but I think this is a good introduction to Super Cage, because in this movie, he's the chemical expert. He works for the FBI. He's a rock star. He knows how to defuse bombs. He knows how to drive Ferraris, motorcycles. What?
Speaks Latin.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting hero, right? And we talked about this on Twitter, Niall, where he's the nerd in this movie, but he also drives Ferrari. Like, he's also like a super stud. It's an interesting dynamic that his character has.
It's like the 90s action trope. It's like the hero with zero training whatsoever, can in fact do everything. It's like, The Matrix actually shows them having to upload how to fly a helicopter into their brains. In other movies, they can do it. Of course, it's like, oh, that's a helicopter. Yeah, of course I can fly that. No bother. Yeah.
I love that shorthand in movies nowadays. I was watching San Andreas with Dwayne Johnson, and in the beginning, he flies a helicopter into this cavern, rescues somebody. And then later on, he steals that helicopter, which probably could have saved many people during this earthquake, and he saves his life. But then it crashes, and then he ends up in a plane, but then he ends up in a boat, and then he finds another vehicle, and he just flies everything known to man in that movie. They just know how. And it just reminded me a lot of Nick Cage in this movie, just grabbing dirt bikes, Ferraris.
Of course you know how to do it. Of course he has experience driving a high-powered rear-wheel drive sports car over the hills of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like, that's not easy terrain. It's not, that car is not designed for those hills. In reality, he would have knocked the front bumper off the first hill he went down. He basically would have hit the bottom and smashed. The front is gone.
Yeah.
And the suspension would have been gone.
It's but it's beautiful though, right? And Michael Bay in the commentary, he hated shooting in San Francisco. He's like, the amount of permits that you have to pull. I've done events in San Francisco. It's miserable pulling all the permits out there. But they had a 2-block radius. He said an entire army of people. And so they shot on Alcatraz. They brought a crane out there, generators, miles of cable. They loaded that entire national park monument with gear, and they didn't get behind schedule. It was when they shot in San Francisco, the car chase, that he got behind schedule. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you read this. You might have read this, but he got behind, and he had to go to a meeting with the producers to get yelled at. And Sean Connery was like, "Hey, I'll come with you," and because he's like, "Screw that, you're doing the best you can." So he walked into a meeting with Sean Connery.
Sean Connery was like, "Look, he's doing fine."
Yeah, he said that. Yeah, he's like, "Give him more money." Like he just so he stuck up for Michael Bay in that. Yeah. But I love that you have the gunfights, you have the rockets, you have these wonderful sets built with these little tracks that are on there and like 40-foot drops in the water. I mean, there were some beautiful sets in that, but that didn't set the production back. It was shooting on the streets of San Francisco, which makes me kind of happy. But this movie, I'm really happy that you recommended this, and I'm happy that I bought the Blu-ray, because this gave me a wonderful insight into Michael Bay's brain. And what I realized was that Michael Bay just has a great idea of who to sell a movie to. Like, when you make a movie, you better know who to sell it to. You better know your audience. You better add things for them. And so in the commentary, I mean, this is back in the 90s when they recorded it for the Criterion Laserdisc, which is amazing.
Old school.
Back in the 90s, he just talked about being a commercial filmmaker. And what he said was, you make these movies, you make a $60 million movie and it's not a hit, they're not going to give you $60 million again. So they gave him $75 million for The Rock, and he's like, I made sure that I made a movie for an audience, a worldwide audience. I wanted to make this car chases, explosions, good people, like directing. He just seems to get what audiences want. And that great evidence of that is the Transformers franchise.
Well, like that is, you've got, the toys, you've got Meg Fox in skimpy outfits.
Yep.
It's like, there you go, teenage boys, sorted.
And that's what he said. He said, I make movies for teenagers. That's what he said. And the results, right? And he also understands foreign box office. Because if you look at the amount of money that Transformers Age of Extinction took in China.
That meant stupid money.
Yeah. I mean, it pulled in, you were in Korea at the time when it came out. Yeah. Do you remember, did Korean audiences go to that movie a lot?
Not so much. It was kind of lost its audience in Korea a little bit. But got it. Yeah, it played big.
And he gets it. I mean, there's over 1 billion people in that country. So if you can connect with those audiences, you're going to keep making movies. You're going to make 300 million, 400 million, 500 million from them. So while people were making fun of Michael Bay for his Transformer movies, they're clearing $1 billion worldwide. So it's
obviously working, right?
Yeah. I mean, he gets it. Michael Bay got to start in music videos. So he directed, Aerosmith, big bombastic films, and he got to start in Bad Boys. He got Will Smith, and he made Will Smith and Martin Lawrence action stars too. I mean, Will Smith's career changed.
Like Bad that was before Independence Day, wasn't it?
That was 95, and then he did that. So Will Smith said there's a really funny thing about working with Michael Bay. It's Ed Harris had some interesting stuff to say about Michael Bay on the commentary too. Jeez Louise. Will Smith said, yeah, he's the one who made me into an action hero. So like he made Bad Boys hyper stylized, and then I mean this is his second feature, $75 million. You have Nick Cage, Oscar winner, Sean Connery, Ed Harris, huge cast, and it sounded like he never got overwhelmed by it. So it
just sounds like, as he said, he knew who he was selling to and what marks he needed to hit to sell it.
Yeah, and he fought hard for a scene. So the scene where the Navy SEALs are taking the submarines into the rock, those are all puppets. Did you know that? That's animatronic puppets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those are miniatures.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a thing on the Blu-ray about doing that. So he fought for so much authenticity in this, and it's pretty interesting. Ed Harris was talking about working with him, and Ed Harris also worked with James Cameron, who was incredibly difficult on set, but he's always on set. James Cameron, he's in the muck with you, which I love. But Ed Harris was talking to Michael Bay. He's like, you don't have to be like James Cameron. He's like, James Cameron's, in his word, he's like, Cameron's kind of an asshole. He's like, you don't have to be like him. You don't have to be a tough guy. And Ed Harris said that Michael Bay's actually really nice and sensitive, but on set he likes to yell and be the general. And if you watch Bad Boys 2 behind the scenes clips, he's yelling. So he's just a big general on these sets. But he gets huge names. He had Frances McDormand in a Transformers movie. So actors must love working with him because of his style. Like what people come back to.
I guess a lot of it is, the way he does stylized action is, you can instantly watch a movie and be like, oh, is this a Michael Bay movie? Like just the way the action is like framed and it's like bombastic and there are explosions everywhere. That stylized kind of action is something, it's somewhat of a lost art really with the explosion to, digital effects everywhere. Like he still uses a lot of practical effects where possible, as far as I've seen. Well, I haven't seen the most recent Transformers, which are obviously quite effect heavy.
That last one boggles my mind. I watched it and it just exhausted me. I just felt, what just happened there?
I think the last one I watched with Leonard Nimoy, and then I was like, all right, yeah.
But in between that, right? He made 13 Hours. Pain and Gain's a good movie. Pain and Gain's nasty. That's a nihilistic little movie right there. You got Dwayne Johnson grilling hands. Like, that's a bonkers fest. So he's seeing. You know what I like about Michael Bay, and this is what Nicolas Cage said about him, is that Bay sort of has a weird edge to him. His humor in his movies are very specific.
Yeah.
And they're kind of weird. Like, he has a weird sense of humor, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there are a lot of, little throwaway, like, some visual gags, some kind of, not so visual, like the just throwaway lines. Like, did we really need to see the hula dancer at the start getting set on fire? That was kind of...
Yeah, he's just I love it. I love that he just had this... I don't know. Even in this movie, there are some really cheeky lines in it. But...
Oh, yeah.
Like when the guy's going down with his streetcar, he's like, like, save yourself!
Oh, Lordy, save us!
He's like, I'm going to kill that guy. But what's interesting too is the more I read about The Rock, there's about 6 different writers. There's a lot of producers who had skin in the game. Nick Cage rewrote all of his roles. Sean Connery had a guy come in and rewrite his roles. They had Aaron Sorkin working on the script. They say Quentin Tarantino did some work on the script.
Yeah.
You just have... You have...
Carrie... Oh.
Yeah, they brought in everybody for rewrites. We talked about Last Action Hero about rewrites, and now we're talking about The Rock with rewrites. But in the end, it still feels like it's a movie. It's a film. It's a classic action film. There's some really great beats.
The thing is, like, if you look at it, you've got almost 2 separate stories. Like, if you could take out this entire half of the movie, which is the Ed Harris story, and it's like this tragic fall where he's basically, he goes to his wife's grave, he's like stealing the rockets, he's like going up against the government, and he's trying to like, do right by all the men who died under his control until like the mercenaries eventually mutiny and, he ends up dying. Like, that's like his tragic story.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the other side, which is the FBI who are trying to stop Ed Harris from, being a terrorist.
They take a guy who's been in prison for 20 years, get him out, get him a haircut. The world's about to blow up, and they take him to a wonderful hotel. And that string, Womack's arm, that string that is attached to his arm is incredibly strong, Niall. Whoever makes that string, or rope, shower rope, I want to hire. Because Womack...
I'd say he's easily pushing to 20 to 40.
Yeah, with the pressure of falling. And also another thing I love about this movie, and I promise you all this isn't going to be a giant love fest, but it is too, because I love this movie. But I like in the first 20 minutes, you have some interesting things established. So in the beginning, you know that General Hummel is doing an exercise, and they go in and steal the gas. They let one of the orbs go, and we see what it does to somebody. And, you know, it's tragic. This is a guy that probably had served with Hummel since the Gulf War or Vietnam or somewhere in there. So you know what the gas does. You know how serious it is. But then you also get another scene with the sarin gas with Nick Cage, where you get to see the gas working. You get to see him diffusing bombs.
You get to see the needle, which has the atropine.
Yeah.
Like the needle.
Yeah, and the guy's like, I'm not going to stab this in my chest. So you have the chess pieces start moving pretty early. So later on, when he has to, as Nick Cage calls it, kabuki himself, that he tried to do it like kabuki, when he has to do that. And then when you have the gas, a teaspoon of this could drop 100 yards, kill everybody, 100 feet, kill everybody. You know what it does to them. So the stakes are quite real in that you just know what the gas can do. You know what Nick Cage can do. And when he stabs himself in the heart earlier, you know why. So it's a miracle that all these neat little bits survived throughout the writing process, because there's some cool callbacks. I mean, it's a good script that was Frankenstein by many different writers.
Well, like even the like Rocket Man gag, that's like a throwback, like part of the movie. Like he's, when his fiance comes home and they're going at it, the song that's playing in the background is Rocket Man.
Yep.
And then call back later in the movie where he calls he fires the rocket at was it Tony Todd?
Yeah, Tony Todd, because you're the Rocket Man. Oh, brother. And what I love too is Nick Cage included the Beatles record in the beginning too. That wasn't in the script. That was a Nick Cage-ism, because he wanted the audience to know, because he hated the Rocket Man line. So he wanted audiences to know that he loved music. I guess if he got an Elton John album, it would have been too on the nose, and then they play Elton John. So they had him getting the Beatles to just show that he's a music junkie. So when he makes a reference later, it makes sense. But Cage was really worried about that. And that's why you have the Beatles album in the beginning.
Yeah, I think, getting it worked. He gets this, it's vinyl, it's not a CD. And do they even talk about how you could get it on CD, but, it sounds better on vinyl, and that whole audiophile debate, which I don't care enough about music to get into. I'm just just give me Spotify. I'll just listen to whatever songs I want to listen to, and I'm good.
I mean, I'm all for pretentious vinyl on soundtracks, though. Mondel's Escape from LA soundtrack, Escape from New York, The Thing. I love my John Carpenter vinyl pretentious soundtracks. But I just buy that to be pretentious, not because of sound.
Well, yeah, I could see that. I don't actually have space for anything pretentious sound-wise. My flat.
But no, a lot is set up early, and we explore, we get the beginning of the film with Ed Harris. We also see that Nick Cage has some aim with his gun when he shoots his little Nerf gun into something.
Yeah, he shoots middle of the target, first try.
Exactly. Yeah, so later on when he's like, die, 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 and kills the guy, I mean, completely different guns, but it comes back to each other. And also Nick Cage had a huge argument with Michael Bay because he wanted to be sitting around in purple underwear playing a guitar, drinking wine after the sarin gas scene. So when she comes home, he's just sitting there without a shirt playing guitar with wine. He's like, that seems like a good way for someone to relax after dying. So Cage fought hard for that. He came out in purple underwear. And Michael Bay just thought, oh, sure, sure, Nick.
Yeah, it's another one of those weird choices that seems to make perfect sense in the context of the movie.
Yeah.
It's why wouldn't you come home and just, you've probably taken your clothes off and have to dump them because you've just been exposed to sarin gas.
Yeah, that's a great point.
your work has probably given you some like overalls or something to come home in, and you're just like, right, get this crap off me. It's relaxing, and then, hey, I'm gonna play my guitar or.
Yeah. And you know, okay, we watch a lot of action movies, and there's a lot of stock action films that just do action beat, action beat, action beat. I think this one is still beloved because of the Zeus's butthole line. And Nick Cage sitting there playing the guitar without a shirt. The really weird strange humor in certain parts. And I think there's enough weirdness in this movie to make it stand out amongst all the other action films that don't even try to be weird. Does that make sense?
Well, what I like is it's meta as well. Like it plays with you a little bit. Like having Sean Connery have a throwaway line where it's like, "Oh yeah, I was trained by British intelligence." It's like, yeah, that could be James Bond. It's like, yeah, he's totally James Bond who got like
kidnapped for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he even has a daughter. Well, Bond wouldn't have that.
Wow.
Well, he might. Bond probably has a bunch floating around.
Always carry protection in the means of a firearm. Not too sure about the other kind.
But no, I mean this film. I gotta tell you, the commentary listening to it made me really happy because I just loved learning about the making of this movie. You had a former Navy SEAL on set.
They have like a bunch of SEALs as the extras for the SEAL team as well.
Oh, it's funny you say that because Michael Biehn, when he had to make speeches, Michael Biehn actually fell apart a little bit one day on set and couldn't read his lines. And he went to his trailer. Michael Bay went to go talk to him. And Biehn just said, listen, I have to make an inspiring speech to Sean Connery, Oscar winner Nick Cage, and a bunch of Navy SEALs who are giving me nothing. So if you watch the movie in the background, the Navy SEALs are just staring at him. They're not like they are murdering him with their eyes. So it threw Michael Biehn. He had been in some gigantic films, Aliens, Terminator, Tombstone, The Abyss, but he had a really hard time acting alongside those Navy SEALs. And the guy who set everything up, the guy who trained, was on set to make sure all the military tactics were right. In the commentary, he made sure to say, my Navy SEALs would never go down to these Marines. He's like, my Navy SEAls would never be in one place. My Navy SEAls would have split off into one place, or would have been a diversion, which would have dragged some people away. And then my Navy, they never would have been in one place at once. So he understood that they need to die, but he had to throw in the commentary that there's no way it would have happened like this. He's like, but it's a movie.
My boys would have been much better than this. We would have totally taken the island. That plan was crap.
Yeah, and he said it in the commentary. He got very defensive, which just made me very happy. So,
well,
yeah.
I guess if you're the guy who's seen as the source of the military tactics in the film, you're going to want to show that you know your stuff. You're like, okay, it's like, look, this was deliberately poorly planned because we needed to set up this situation where you just have good speed and Mason.
And not like, if they would have dragged Nucci down with them, Danny Nucci. Remember him back in the 90s? Titanic, Crimson Tide?
Yeah, he was the friend in Titanic, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had a big 90s run. If they would have dragged him with them, that movie would have been something different entirely. What?
That's a good one. Crimson Tide is a good one.
Oh yeah, that's a Gene Hackman, Washington going head to head.
Well, Gene,
beautiful.
On me, so they've added all the new movies to Disney Plus, that new thing.
You have Crimson Tide on it?
Yeah, I've got Crimson Tide on it.
I don't think Disney Plus is R-rated in the States. Jay Cluett, who I do the Deep Blue Sea podcast with, he said Deep Rising's on Disney Plus now.
Yeah, they just, in the last few weeks, they just added a bunch of new stuff, adult stuff on there, basically.
Oh.
And you can, set, parental controls and stuff, and then go and see, this. It's got, Die Hard 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's got, basically all the Fox kind of movies. It's great.
They'll probably bring in their Touchstone films later on, too. Captain Ron.
Yeah.
The wonderful Captain Ron. Dimension? Because they own all of the Weinstein Dimension stuff now, too, don't they? They'll put
maybe.
Phantoms. Affleck was the bomb in Phantoms. I've never watched Phantoms. Or maybe I have. I think I background watched it one time. All right, back to The Rock. And also on the commentary, which I thought was pretty fun, that I was listening to with Michael Bay, there were a lot of issues about the boilers still working in the film. And a lot of people questioned that on set. Producers, writers, everyone wondered why. But it's still a working facility. Yeah. So I mean, they still do tours there.
Yeah, so it's still going to be switched on.
Yeah.
Like,
But people are worried about that.
I don't get why the boiler needed to be so flamey and spinny.
Yeah.
You know, surely a kind of a better design for that sort of thing. I guess it works in a movie for an action beat, but would a boiler realistically have this periodic flamey kind of thing? I don't know.
I love it though.
Was that designed for the set piece, or is that what the boiler actually looks like?
That's a great point. I mean, they were there. They probably took a look at it, but I don't think there's ever. I'm sorry if you are a boiler manufacturer or repairman, but yeah, it's kind of funny that it's on an exact timer. But it's still cool. Remember later on when Nick Cage goes, "That was badass, by the way." Like he calls him out, like, "That was sweet how you did that." And also too, you think he's gonna leave him, and he opens the door and he's like, "Welcome to the Rock." Like, that's cool. That's cool.
That line is explicitly for the trailer. Like, there's no two ways about it. It's like, okay, we're going to have scenes of San Francisco, maybe some terrorists, and then we're going to have close up on Sean, welcome to the Rock.
Oh,
Done.
Yeah. Beautiful. And also, too, that moment really sells why they had to bring him.
Yeah.
Because some of these movies where we need you to come with us, but they don't really need them to come with him. So they bring him they're trapped in that corridor, and he goes through the thing and he lets them in. So that explains why they destroyed half of San Francisco and gave him a nice haircut and fed him some nice food to bring him there. Because I guess after that moment, it justifies why he's there. So I guess it's good storytelling on a certain front that he knows how to slide through.
Kind of impassable object that only he would be able to get through.
Yeah. And then so right then and there as the audience, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. That's why we just spent an hour in San Francisco. This movie doesn't get to the Rock quickly.
No, you've got the opening, which I think that's about 8 minutes long, because I remember having the soundtrack, and basically the Rock opening beat, like that whole soundtrack for that whole sequence is like 8 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the whole bit where you have to go and meet Nick Cage, and you've got the sarin gas, and then you've got him finding out that Carl is pregnant. Then we move to San Francisco, and we've got the interview bit, then there's the hotel bit, then there's the car chase bit, then there's the bit with the daughter, and then we go briefings and stuff, and it's, I'd say a good 40, 50 minutes of content before we even get to, The Rock.
Womack, can we get him some coffee here? Oh, I love that interrogation scene. Oh my gosh. But also more things are set up. Nicolas Cage gives his word. Goodspeed gives his word. Womack rips it up. So then when he lets him go later, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting is whenever I think about the San Francisco car chase, I'm really not that big of a fan of it because a lot of people get murdered in it. It's Sean Connery going to see his daughter, and people die in that scene. I mean, they drive with reckless abandon through that city, and Michael Bay admitted that. And Michael Bay even said, I don't know how much I love this scene, but when we played it without, it was just a giant hole in the movie. So you would have just had, hey, let's go get Sean Connery, let's give him a haircut, let's take him to the Rock. It would have played flat.
Yeah, so it definitely needed something there, right?
Yeah, and I mean, in that process, you get the iconic Nick Cage shot of him standing up with the camera going, vertical, while Nick Cage turns around. You get him stealing the dirt bike from the kid. Like, you just wrecked your Ferrari. Yeah, well, that's mine, too. He's like,
wasn't mine.
It wasn't mine. And then he's talking to his buddy on the phone. He's like, I'm driving a stolen motorcycle right now, and I feel terrible about it. So, and also, I guess it establishes trust between Mason and Goodspeed, because instead of Mason and Goodspeed saying, hey, you're under arrest when he's with his daughter, he's saying, hey, come with us. We're looking for you.
Yeah, he played that, again, it shows a little bit of compassion and that he's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And, it builds that trust, which, comes back later, doesn't it?
So he comes back for him. He doesn't want him to die. I think Stanley helps him. So Mason goes and helps Stanley. So despite the fact that it's incredibly gratuitous, it would have left a big hole of action in the movie. And it wouldn't have established that nice trust element between them.
How would they have even got to that point? Like, basically, you just have him get away from the hotel, and then, like, what's the kind of the next step? Does he still call his buddy and be like, oh, hey, this guy got away. Do you know anything?
Oh, yeah. I guess they could have had a big fight in the hotel, and then
Maybe.
he disappears, and then they show up when he's with his daughter.
Yeah.
I bet you Michael Bay wishes he did that, though, because he hated that car chase.
I think the thing is, like, almost every movie you see that's set in San Francisco, is it like a rule with, like, filmmaking in San Francisco, you have to have a car chase that shows, like, a tram and, like, some cars going off hills and stuff? Like, it's just...
Yeah. And you know what? I am kind of happy that the streets are really busy, though, because I've driven in San Francisco before. Have you been to San Francisco?
I haven't driven in it, but I've been there.
Traffic's a nightmare. I had to drive like a rental truck to pick up a bunch of gear and parallel park on streets to load up grills, and just you're stuck in traffic for forever. So I'm kind of happy that there was a lot of traffic. Like Bullet, there's not much traffic in it.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes me happy that they're wiping people. It kind of seems like that's the way a car chase would be. But after Mason does murder some cops, and he's like, I hope they have insurance. It's like, well, I hope they have life insurance. It's the one sore spot of the film for me. Do you think that? So, do you like that car chase?
I've never really given it much thought, to be honest. I'm like, oh yeah, I love the one-liner. It's like, oh, you just like ruined your Ferrari or whatever. But that's a cool action beat, like him just up this Ferrari that he's taken. And other than that, it's not a particularly good car chase. As car chases go, it's fairly by the book. He's just like driving, and you don't really get a sense of Nick Cage is in a Ferrari. Mason is in a Hummer. How fast do those things go, and how fast does a Ferrari go realistically?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you need to be driving at peak performance in a Ferrari to catch up with that Hummer. You could catch it in 20, 30 seconds.
Pretty quick. Yeah, pretty quick. Especially since the Hummer's knocking everything out of the way.
But that's not unique to this movie.
Huh?
Like, if you look at every movie, every cop TV show, everything, it's always like, why are all the cars always the same speed? Why don't you just have someone who just gets into a car and then just puts their foot down and is like, oh, it seems like their engine is bigger than ours. I guess we can't catch them.
Yeah, but I guess I live with it now because I never liked it. I would always complain about it, but after hearing Michael Bay talk about it, after hearing the Sean Connery story, and you and I just establishing how it helps further some beats of the story, it makes sense. It's cool. I mean, and it also gives a good insight into Michael Bay, because if you think about all the car chases in his films, Bad Boys, The Island, Transformers, there's so many car chases. So I guess it's just a staple of what he does.
And, that shot, the, basically spinning, upward panning hero shot, like,
yeah,
that's trademarks practically. Like,
oh, it's beautiful. And someone broke down how many people have tried to recreate that shot, but they haven't really figured out the camera movement that Michael Bay adds to those shots to make it look so epic. So it's one thing to just have an actor stand up, or to dolly along the side and then have the actor stand up. But the way he films it is he just sort of lifts the camera up with the actors, and it makes it come across as so cool. It
lifts, but it also rotates at the same time. And I think there might be a little bit of a pullback as well, or like an adjustment in like the aspect ratio or something, like basically pulling out to a wider angle.
That's Michael Bay's. Well, Hitchcock did it first, but then Spielberg. But that's Michael Bay's push zoom.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And it looks great. And it's in all of his movies. And it should keep staying in his movies because it looks cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a cool shot.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, so how about this?
Like, that's the problem with like cool shots. You end up with people copycatting them, and all of a sudden they become, rote. And it's like, oh, you just see it everywhere and it loses its appeal. Like, same with bullet time in The Matrix. It's like there was a whole spate of movies, just every movie had this slow-mo action in it, and it was like done to death.
It works because it's organic, would you say? Because he
Yeah.
did it first. And
Yeah.
so
Uh,
I think you nailed it, because after Matrix came out, there's so much wire work.
Yeah.
There was so much bullet time, and none of it felt organic. So it all just felt very yawny.
Yeah. Whereas in the Matrix, it made sense in the context of the movie, almost like having that shot.
Yeah. I do like, though, Blade featured a kind of bullet time, not with all the cameras surrounding him to the certain extent, but when Deacon Frost dodges the bullets. Blade's underrated. I love that movie. No, but yeah, I think you're right. We get that iconic shot. They had done that in Bad Boys 2. They did it in Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2. But yeah, it's okay. You sold me on it. I've always loved The Rock, but I've never liked The Chase. But now I understand all the cool things that come from it, so it feels totally fine to me now. I dig it. I just had to spend some more time with it and not hate on it.
Yeah, it's fit for purpose, I think, is the kind of.
Man, so Michael Bay actually told a story in that chase. That's what I like when action scenes tell a story, and that's what this one did. I'm happy. Hey, so how about this? After that mind-blowing revelation, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will talk more. The Rock. We will be right back. Welcome back to Movies, Films, and Flicks, and this has been a tough one for me, Niall, because there's just so much to talk about in this movie. It's
full of little things that we could go into hours worth of content on just tiny little things. Maybe to follow up your Deep Blue Sea podcast, you need to do the Rock podcast.
Ooh, the Rock Minute. Oh, that'd be amazing. And I actually wrote a Cracked article just about Bokeem Woodbine's Crisp character in this scene. At the end, when it's down between Fry and Barrow, and then you have Francis and Baxter standing off.
Yeah.
And they're like Crisp, disarm the general. But in the background, Bokeem Woodbine's doing some excellent acting. Like, he could have just been, not doing anything in the background.
There, the background just being a guy.
Mm-hmm. But you learn that he had been with Hummel since Desert Storm, so he's really conflicted. He's looking scared. When they yells, he flinches. He's really torn about what he should do. So you have the 10th name on the call sheet putting in great work in a scene where he's the 5th character in the scene. There's too much. It's like when we did Back to the Future, Niall, when you pitched that to me. Then I realized how much that world is loved with the documentaries, the books, the time travel. This is a dense movie, and I think it works too. You have Tony Todd in here. You have Michael Biehn. This is a loaded, but I guess that was the thing in the 90s, right? Where you had Con Air with.
That was a super loaded cast as well, right?
Yeah, it's just an embarrassment of riches in this movie, and I think that's what this one had too. And that's really, obviously, this is Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, and Don Simpson actually passed away shortly before this was made. So that he helped get this made, and then he passed away. Then it just became because it was Bruckheimer Simpson, right?
Yeah.
And then it just became Bruckheimer. But you had two of the biggest producers in the world. You had a young hotshot director. So actually, Michael Bay did a background video for Days of Thunder, and that's how he met these guys.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then that's why they brought him in for Bad Boys. And he kept turning down The Rock, Michael Bay, because I guess the script was really bad.
Well, yeah, as you said, they went through however many script doctors to get it to where it was for shooting.
And then you have Nick Cage rewriting it on set. I gotta tell you, I love the movie making process sometimes, because just the amount of insanity on these film sets, and then this movie had 4 editors.
Really?
4 editors. And Michael Bay was talking about that, and he said that normally I'm in the edit bay with all the editors, but he's like, I had one editor who didn't want me in there with him, but he still did great stuff. So I guess there are editors who were better with character scenes, and there was people who were better with action scenes. So this was hacked up by 4 people.
Like, you'd have some people who are they just have an eye for a certain kind of shot or a certain kind of sequence.
4 of them, though. It's just a wild movie. This was a by committee movie, but it still feels like a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah, well, I think he's got enough of his stamp on it, like just in the shot choice, in the The action beats, whole kind of the flow is still very, very Michael Bay. And I assume he would have had final say over the edit anyway, like regardless of what the editors actually did.
No, I think you're right. And also, Ed Harris was talking about, I've read about this before, where people working on Michael Bay movies, they don't really know where all the cameras are sometimes. Michael Bay will just be like, act. And so you have to be very instinctual. I think actors like doing it because it's a fast-moving thrill ride. When you work with Clint Eastwood, you get 1 or 2 takes. When you work with Michael Bay, you get 5, 6 cameras, and you're in a giant set. So it must test you to a certain degree. And Ed Harris said that he was shot from every single angle you could think of, but most of his shots were just headshot. Like, he was mostly just tied up on his face. He's like, and I get why you do that. He's like, I don't know why they film my feet then during these scenes.
Well, maybe it would have looked cool. Maybe he wanted to
exactly. Yeah. And you know what's interesting? People complain about that, but I'd rather have enough footage than not enough. I mean, you're in Alcatraz. Like, you're there. You got to shoot.
Like, the thing is, yeah, if you've got the resources to run 6 cameras at once, then run 6 cameras. Like,
if you can afford that much film, then
just do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Shoot it.
And they did. I mean, this was $75 million back in the day. So with inflation, that easily jumps to 150, 140 million. That's big for an action picture. And with inflation worldwide, it cleared 500 million. Like John Wick doesn't even do that anymore. I miss the days of gigantic non-superhero, non-sequel action movies. Speed, True Lies. It won't come back.
The days of like the tentpole just action movie are gone. Like, it's all franchise. It's all about churning out these profit-making films like clockwork, and it's just like, okay, this franchise made $1 billion in its last iteration. Okay, let's make another one of them in 2 years, and we'll just release it, and the same billion people will go and see it.
It's hard to hate on it because it makes money, and that's also where Michael Bay has sort of thrived with his sequels. I mean, all the Transformers movies. He's controlled that empire. And so I guess for him, I think he's, like he said on the commentary, he seems to just be happy to get a movie every 2 years with a $100 million budget that will make money, because he knows that'll make more money the next go around. Did you see 6 Underground with Ryan Reynolds?
No, I don't think so.
It's a Michael Bay movie with Ryan Reynolds, Melanie Laurent. It is insane, Niall. It's what happens when Michael Bay gets Netflix money in full control. He doesn't have 8 editors and 4 producers and Jerry Bruckheimer. 6 Underground is this pure distilled Bay. This comes out as the moonshine out of the still. This does not go into barrels and get aged. It doesn't go.
Raw.
Yeah.
If you drink it, it will rot your insides, kind of stuff.
And then it doesn't get finished in sherry casks. Like this is just hooch made by Michael Bay, and it's glorious. But some of it doesn't make sense. It's very crisp and clean. A lot of people die.
Pretty much Ryan Reynolds could probably carry anything. Like, I love him. He's just so good.
So it's about this billionaire who pays a bunch of people to pretend like they're dead, so then they can just go around the world free of being part of an organization, and they can right the world's wrongs, and they're ghosts. So
that's delightfully weird.
Yeah, dude, there's the magnet scene in 6 Underground. It's so heightened. Like, so you know in the Transformer films, where everything is heightened. Shia's yelling, the parents are yelling, John Turturro's yelling, Mark Wahlberg's yelling, TJ Miller's yelling, everybody's yelling, Kelsey Grammer's yelling. There's just a lot of yelling. Yeah, Kelsey Grammer's in one of those. I think he's either the Extinction or Last Night, one of those. But you have everybody yelling, but in 6 Underground, man, you gotta watch it. It's crazy. And it's just, it's the moonshine of Michael Bay movies. Like, just pure distilled Bay in your eyes, and it burns a little bit, and it makes you tired, and it's very oof. It's not this movie, that's for sure, but no, I dig it. And there's a couple more things I liked about this movie. There's some good quiet moments in this film. I think William Forsythe gets some good work to do as FBI agent Ernest Paxton. He does good work. I like his quiet moment with Nick Cage in the bathroom, where Nick Cage is barfing, or Stanley Goodspeed's barfing.
Yeah, and just there's like, look, man, I'll be there to back you up. Yeah, I'm sorry you're vomiting right now, but
Yeah, he's like, you trained for this. It's a sensitive moment, right? It's a really interesting, quiet scene of a film, and that's why I like it. It should play very tonally imbalanced, but the quiet scenes I think work just as well as the other ones, and you can tell that Connery and Cage liked each other too. What's up?
On that, so the callback there is that basically you can see that he's kind of an understanding guy. So at the end, then when Goodspeed is like, oh yeah, he's vaporized, he backs him up and is like, oh yeah, that can totally happen. That's,
that can happen. You can get eviscerated. Yeah. You can get vaporized. Oh yeah, that can definitely happen. Oh, I love that. It's just I don't know. I don't even know why that character's in the movie Forsyth, right? It could have just been Womack, but for some reason he's in there.
Absolute asshole of an FBI chief.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have anyone who's got like Goodspeed's back. You've just got this dick.
Yeah, exactly. Just Womack yelling at him.
Yeah.
But it works.
Do this.
Oh man, it just works. And Nick Cage was also talking about the hairstylist, which feels really dated nowadays. And Nick Cage didn't really want that hairstylist in the movie who was cutting his hair because he just thought, like, this is just, what's the word? Very exaggerated, very stereotypical. But then Cage just goes, but it's kind of funny. He's like, it's kind of weird that it's funny. He's like, Michael Bay made it funny for some reason, so I don't hate it as much as I should. But it's just a very heightened, odd choice in Bay's movie, but it doesn't feel odd now because everything's so heightened.
Yeah, it's, again, I've met that hairdresser.
Yeah.
Like, I've met people like that. And, in modern culture now, like, it's quite normal to see like that kind of a caricature everywhere. Like, some people just put it on themselves. Some people are generally that loud in their life. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay.
But the guy was super nice, though, right? He's like, they don't like you very much, do they? He's like, I just care that you liked your haircut. It's he gave him lines. And what I've noticed about Michael Bay movies, there's so many supporting characters. Remember in the War Room in the beginning? There's 8 different talking heads.
Yeah.
Talking about that.
They name them all. It's like, state your name. It's like, oh, this is FBI General Director, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is the president, and this is this guy, and this is this guy. And they're never seen again. No.
And they all have a lot of weight to them, too, and they're good. I think, you know what, I wonder what this is. I know Michael Bay got his start in commercials. And commercials and music videos have to move really quick. Because you just don't have that much time to shoot. So it's just go.
About like 30 seconds, and you need to use every frame.
Exactly.
You've got like 3-4 minutes, so you've got a little bit more time to breathe, but still, it's going to be quite compressed.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if for the rest of his movies, you watch his films, and you see a lot of recurring characters in all of his movies, but then there's also these big name character actors who get 3 minutes of screen time. I wonder if Michael Bay just brings them in because he wants pros to work with and then get out of there. Like, just bring some pros in, bring some good names in, knock them out, send them out, let's go home. And he seems like that kind of guy.
Really good pro. They'll come in, do what you want in one take, and then you can can it, and it's like, right, next shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting. That's why I like watching this movie. I think Bad Boys had a pretty big cast. But once you go to The Rock, and then you go to Pearl Harbor. I mean, Pearl Harbor had Michael Shannon, Alec Baldwin. I mean, just a huge name of actors in it. In The Island, just if you go through that again.
Like Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, Sean Bean, Jaimin Hunsu, Steve Buscemi. I think he just likes.
Buscemi?
Yeah, he's the guy he's the janitor that works at the island. Yeah. And you know what's interesting? For all of Michael Bay's films, that seems the most un-Michael Bay. Because in the Rock commentary, I think he always understood you need an A-lister. So Pain and Gain, he brought in huge A-listers. Pearl Harbor, he brought in 3 of the hottest names at the time to make that movie. I think 13 Hours is a little different because it's more of an ensemble, so it wasn't that big of a budget, so he didn't want that A-lister. But
Armageddon.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like you got
Billy Bob.
Ving in it.
Yeah, just massive names, but
Like, Liv
gosh.
Tyler, like
Aerosmith.
huge.
He did a bunch of videos for them, so they must have done that. They must love Michael Bay. But
Yeah.
The Island has. I love Ewan McGregor. I think he's a great actor. But to cast Ewan McGregor in a $90 million sci-fi epic that isn't Star Wars with a built-in fan base, that seems very un-Michael Bay to me to cast him. And I think Ewan McGregor's great. But I wonder if he maybe lost out on an A-lister, then had to bring in Ewan. That's not a thing slight on Ewan.
Well, like the thing about Ewan McGregor is like, he had done some quite interesting work before then. Like this is how he ended up in Star Wars to begin with. Like Trainspotting, for example, is awesome. Like we know the guy has range.
Mm-hmm.
He's Obi-Wan.
He
But at that stage, like, he was, quite big because he was in Star Wars, so he was a well-known name. It might have been that he was just in town because he was doing Star Wars promos, and Michael Bay was like, "Hey, do you want to come do this movie with Scarlett Johansson?" And he was like, "Sure."
Yeah, Sean Bean's in it too. Great.
Yeah.
That's an Have you watched that recently? I had it on in the background.
Not really.
That's an expensive movie right there, Niall. That is they built some sets for that movie. But I guess going back to this, it's just what I like about this is you see so much of the early DNA of Michael Bay in this movie. And I think some of the biggest traits, some of the best and worst traits have led to that. I mean, the comically large explosions. They dropped that bomb down there with a gallon of gasoline, and it's about a half a mile explosion.
Or the single planes bombs that blow up half an island.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he knows the big explosions. You get Nicolas Cage surviving the heightened aesthetic, and I wonder if ever since then because he hasn't reunited with Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage just had nothing but nice things to say about Michael Bay. But I wonder if Michael Bay likes to have. So he brought in Shia for all these movies, and he brought in Mark Wahlberg for all these movies. So I think he likes to have.
For a while.
Oh, Affleck. I think he likes to have collaborators, not people who challenge him, which is fine because he leads such a big set. And I'm not phrasing that in a way where he gets rid of people who want to do their own thing.
Megan Fox have a falling out.
Yeah.
He's too controlled.
Yeah, because she didn't want to deal with his crap, right? Yeah, and then they made up, and then she was in the TMNT movies, which is kind of nice. But I wonder if moving forward he didn't want to deal with that anymore. So we've got kind of other actors, because it was really interesting listening to Nick Cage talk about this, because he didn't want to film the scene at the end. He didn't want to be at the church ripping that thing off the table. Yeah, he didn't want to do certain scenes, but so he rewrote them and he did them because he's a professional and he liked Michael Bay. But I wonder if after that Michael Bay just kind of said, "Listen, we need contributors, or I need not a contributor. I need someone that works like a symbiotic relationship where we work together."
Yeah, I think just on that scene is kind of the only one that feels a little bit tacked on. Like, did they really need to show that church scene with the leg, or kind of left it at?
Did he just walk into that church and just rip it off? And then, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, basically, yeah. We just went in, ripped the leg off the thing, and then ran away.
And then they learn who shot JFK. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What would you do with that information, Niall?
I don't know. Write a blog post these days. It's like, is it going to be earth-shattering news? The real truth of what happened, on my birthday 60-odd years ago.
Oh, that's when it was, on your birthday?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The only way I can actually remember the date is that was actually on my birthday. I can remember that.
Oh, jeez Louise. So, hey, where would you rank these movies, like this film in against the other 90s blockbusters? Is this tier 1 action? Is this tier 2? Is this up there with T2 and maybe Speed or True Lies?
Definitely.
Yeah?
This is, it's got all the elements there. Like, it's got the funny quips. like the little one-liners here and there. It's got some good action. You've got the Die Hard on an island kind of feel to it, where it's like, okay, we're one guy against many and has to take down this threat kind of thing, where everything had to be Die Hard on or something.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, the music is great. Hans Zimmer's got this score going through it that's, if you were to listen to the theme from The Rock and straight afterwards listen to the theme from Pirates of the Caribbean, you'll basically think they're from the same movie. Like, a lot of the same notes and through, because something I do like to do is I'll listen to like the best of Hans Zimmer or like, various movie composers and just listen to the themes. And you'll be like, okay, is that one from The Rock? It's like, maybe. Is that Pirates of the Caribbean? I'm like, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no, it's solid. It's a wonderful score, and I also like the subversion of the classic villain trope, where Hummel isn't some maniacal general. They're saying he's a hero. No, he's a legend. At the end, he actually was trying to bluff everyone, but he ended up bringing these mercenaries who were legit, not crazy,
Yeah.
but
They were in it for the money, right? And
Yeah.
as soon as the money was there, whereas he was an idealist.
Mhm.
And, I feel like Hummel was redeemed in the end. Like, he wasn't actually the villain at all. He was just, someone who's going about trying to do good in a misguided way. He's almost like I wouldn't quite say an anti-hero, but I wouldn't say he's a villain.
Yeah, it made him much more likable. And at the end he dies, and then he's not around anymore. Then it becomes more about the other two guys. It's a really interesting. The main antagonist is just killed off, but he also kills Bokeem Woodbine. He just shoots him right in the chest. So it's he just gets it over his head.
He chose to, go against him, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Is it a bit naive though that he kept playing kind of general towards the end? I mean, what did they say? They were mercenaries at that point.
Yeah.
So they're sticking. Call him general. What's up?
Mercenaries still have ranks.
Yeah, it's true.
Have a chain of command. Even if you're soldiering for money.
Yeah, and he just lost control at the end because his bluff was called.
His bluff was called, therefore he didn't have the money, which meant he was no longer in charge.
Makes sense. Oh, I just learned something fun. The DP, John Schwartzman, started with Michael Bay on the Meatloaf. So Michael Bay directed Bat Out of Hell and I Would Do Anything for Love. And John Schwartzman worked on that. He also did Airheads, by the way. Love that movie. But this is what Schwartzman came from. He did Benny and June, then he did Meatloaf, then he did Airheads with Brendan Fraser. Meatloaf, a pyromaniac.
Weird. They're like Benny and June was a weird one.
Yeah, so these tiny films, Airheads, Meatloaf, A Pyromaniac's Love Story, REM, Strange Currencies, Mr. Wrong, the Ellen DeGeneres Bill Pullman movie, and then The Rock. But then he moved on to Conspiracy Theory, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Seabiscuit, National Treasure, Book of Secrets, Night at the Museum, The Amazing Spider-Man, Dracula Untold, Jurassic World. He had quite a jump there.
Well, yeah, I guess for a little while he did like Michael Bay's stuff, so Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, did you say?
Yeah.
And then they could pretty much do whatever he wanted after that.
I mean, after surviving the huge shoot that was Pearl Harbor, you could pretty much do anything after that.
Yeah.
I would say. But yeah, this movie, it's interesting how Michael Bay took a lot of people with him. He took a lot of returning, the camera people, like his John Schwartzman as DP. This is now they're under the tutelage of Simpson and Bruckheimer, but this is a young crew getting this stuff done, and it looks legit. This was big. I guess the more I research it, the more I'm impressed by it, and just the more I learn about it. And the production designer stuck with Michael Bay, which is pretty cool, all throughout.
The thing is, like, a lot of times, like, it's not just limited to film. Like, if people find that they do good work together, they'll stay together. Like, my previous team and like my previous company, like after I left, it turned out like 4 or 5 of them all moved to the same company and are like working together still on the same team. Like, so that team is kind of just like stuck together because they like working together and they're like doing good work.
Mm-hmm. And you get, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're a good crew, I mean, that's half the film industry. That's why there's such a lack of diversity in the film industry, because people just bring in the people that they've worked with before. But I guess if you're working with a crew you like and you're basically going into 3 months of no sleep, I get you want to know people that you're working with and being grumpy with out and about. So yeah, it makes sense. Hey, so what's up?
You know, the first-hand experience of that, right?
Exactly. Hey, so before we get out of here, what are your 3 favorite moments from this movie?
My 3 favorite moments. So I think I guess we can go in reverse order. So probably third would be, I think the whole scene in the bathroom, sorry, the shower room. That whole sequence, like where, you know, Michael Biehn and Ed Harris are just like shouting at each other. It's like, you must give that order. I cannot give that order. And they're just like shouting. And then, you know, nobody gives the order to fire. Like, they are still at a standoff and kind of like Ed Harris doesn't want to fire on these guys. And the SEALs don't want to fire. But then all of a sudden, you know, you just end up with this firefight.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, the SEAL team just gets taken out. And then, you know, we have this whole thing. But that whole scene is just like, it's not like what you get in, you know, some more recent movies where it would just be like, oh, they've triggered, let's immediately go. We've got sentry guns that just start firing and stuff. And it would just be like, boom. Like, it builds. And you still think it's like, okay, right, there's this, there's a chance that they might actually just negotiate and just be like, you know, they'll all get maybe taken captive and, you know, then they escape later or something. But yeah, I think that whole sequence is just pretty awesome.
My number 3 is when the guy gets killed by the air conditioner and his leg is just twitching. Do bodies normally do that? Yeah, does that happen? Yeah, that happens. Well, I'm taking a bomb apart here. If you just cut me some slack. That's another instance of just Michael Bay weird, sick, macabre humor of death.
But yeah, there's no need for that at all. Like, it serves no other purpose except as like just a visual gag and just a throwaway line. It's just like, oh yeah, dead bodies twitch. Here you go.
That makes me happy. So that's my third. What's your second favorite?
My second would be the escape from the cells, where like Cage is just there, and it's like, you know, the thing you never told me is like, and it'd be really, really, really useful here, and it's like, how the hell do you get out of the cells? And then all of a sudden his door just swings open and he's just like, trade secret. And it's just like, yes, that is just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick finds that out. He never like finds out how Mason got out of the cell. It's just like,
yeah, I'm gonna gut you, boy. And he's doing that voice.
Yeah, it's like, I take pleasure in gutting you, boy.
Oh, man. All right, so my number 2, let's see. I don't want to bring up the shower room. That's easy, so I'll talk about something different in there. Let's see. What are some other moments I love in this movie? I love just this set build during the... What are those? So Michael Bay originally wanted it to be on these tracks. I forget the word for it. So they're on... Remember the gunfight where he kills Dr. Kelso from Scrubs? By lighting his feet on fire, then cutting him off, and then he falls down, then they're shooting into the... Art
kind of thing, or...
Yeah, trolley. Yeah, so they had a trolley at first, and it wasn't even moving. Michael Bay was just shooting the camera. He originally wanted to be in those carts moving the entire time, so they're moving through the facility, but then they ended up with just that cart on the wheel, on the tracks to save money. But the set build in that, I mean, that's a deep set. They filled that up with water... 30 feet deep. They had people hanging. Nick Cage was afraid of heights. They originally had a scene where Sean Connery pegged Dr. Kelso to the cart. That's why he stuck to it. But then they cut that out, and they never show why he stuck to that thing. But it's just such an impressive, and my whole growing up and watching that movie, it's a really neat set to build for 3 minutes of an action scene. Doesn't make much sense, but I love that Sean Connery has his little flammable, gasoline bottle that he squirts on the guy's feet. Then he lights the match. The dude doesn't even hear it happening. And it's just Dr. Kelso getting killed by Sean Connery. It doesn't get better than that. So I'm going to take that. That's my number 2.
So
I know my number 1. I know my number 1.
Yeah, I think the one that I would go for as, my favorite piece of this is the scene where Hummel is trying to draw them out. So he's got a hostage and he's got a gun to the guy's head. And then Sean Connery just walks out, cool as anything. And he's like, I'm here now. And then somebody's like, you will address the general as General Sir. And he's like, very well, General Sir. And he's just like so snarky about it. And he's just like, and it seems to me that, since you're a mercenary, you're not really much of a general, sir, or something like that. It's like brilliant.
You're a lunatic.
Yeah.
And you know that actor that they were going to kill, he was so in character that he kept throwing off Ed Harris.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had a hard time shooting that because the guy was acting like he was about to die. It was a wonderful. They said how excellent he was because he went real method in it.
Yeah.
But he made everyone uncomfortable on set by going so method.
That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, so my final thing. I mean, we haven't even talked about how he shoves the green orb in the guy's mouth and then his face melts and then the Rocket Man thing. But I just like the green smoke where Nick Cage goes out with the flares on his knees. The plane flies by, and for some reason the plane drops the missile too. Like, it's too late, so they blow that up, and Nick Cage flies about 70 feet. But the look of it. And there's a behind-the-scenes featurette about how they did it. This was 96, so special effects weren't really there at the time. But if you watch it again, the plane flying up, the explosion, it looks beautiful. And just the iconic image. I mean, you take one image from The Rock, it might be the flare scene. So that's my favorite right there, is the green smoke.
Yeah, that is a pretty awesome scene. Like, just from you mentioning that song, it comes back to the soundtrack again. I can hear the soundtrack now playing in my head, and I can just picture exactly the thing. And like, it cuts to the guy. It does like a quick pullback to the guy who's got the binoculars, and he's like, "We've got green smoke," and then it goes back to Nick Cage, and he's just there. Yeah, it's
wonderful. Yeah, it's just a beautiful scene. But no, I just want to thank you for joining me, man. This was a lot of fun just to research more about the movie, spend a lot more time with it, because I had never researched this film, and now after researching it, I think I like it more, just to hear about the insanity behind the set.
We've done a couple of these, and you've always seemed to end up enjoying the digging more into it, so we'll keep them coming.
Yeah, give me another one. This was fun, man. But so what do you want to do next? You have any ideas?
Not yet.
All right.
I'll have to figure something out.
All right, so California Man. Oh, we already did that. But no, man. Well, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, cheers.
All right, so for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, and for Niall Moore, this is Movies, Films, and Flicks. We'll see you next week.
Yes, that was Mark Niall talking about The Rock. Losers always whine about doing their best. Winners listen to Con Air the podcast, or Deep Blue Sea the podcast, where you can hear Mark and Jay talk about Deep Blue Sea adjacent films. My Connery is terrible, I'm sorry. You can listen to me and Mark talk about Deep Blue Sea adjacent films over on Deep Blue Sea. You can find all of Mark's writings over on moviesfilmsandflicks.com. Many other podcast episodes like this one talk about all kinds of films with all kinds of guests over on Movies, Films and Flicks. And you can, of course, listen to me and Mark over on Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, talking about Deep Blue Sea adjacent films. But as for this episode on The Rock, I've been Jake Lewis. That was Mark Hoffmeyer. Come back next week or the bunny gets it.
Sigh.
Anara.